I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. During remarks with fellow Senate Democrats on Tuesday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer touted the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Senator Joe Manchin announced last week he had reached a deal with the Senate Majority Leader on the tax, energy, and health care bill. President Biden and Democratic lawmakers have touted the legislation as a solution to combat 40-year high inflation. Republicans, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, have argued that the act won't actually help bring down prices.
My remarks, we expect to have an agreement on the PACT Act with amendments, start voting at 5, and I believe it will pass and pass this evening. So that's very good news. And given that we'll get PACT Act done today, I'm very hopeful we can get NATO done tomorrow. It looks like we're coming to an agreement on amendments on that as well. Okay? Now, let's talk about today. So I'm really glad to be joined by Senators Wyden, Whitehouse, Schatz, and Smith. We've had a really good caucus conversation today, focused, of course, on the Inflation Reduction Act. There was enthusiasm. There was unity. There was just a great feeling that we would get momentous things done for America in the next week. The Democratic-led Senate is focused on these priorities for Americans: lowering costs, reducing inflation and the deficit, helping our veterans, and better competing with countries like China. Democrats are working to solve the real problems in people's lives. These are things we hear about every day from our constituents. The Inflation Reduction Act achieves 3 main goals: lowers prices for prescription drugs, lowers energy costs for average citizens, and fights climate change in the most significant way that we've ever done, and reduces the deficit and inflation while causing many good-paying jobs. So this is really a very comprehensive and historic piece of legislation. It's groundbreaking. It's things that we have looked at to try and do for a generation. And the idea that we can finally get prescription drug costs down and allow negotiation. The idea that we can close loopholes and cause wealthy individuals and corporations to pay at least a fairer share of tax. The idea that we can actually reduce inflation while doing all these things, creating good-paying jobs, and the idea that we finally will start leading the world instead of following the world in terms of reducing the amount of carbon, poison carbon, that's thrown into our atmosphere is just, it's breathtaking, and it gives Democrats really a jolt of happiness, as it will give Americans a jolt of happiness. So, we're on track to consider this groundbreaking legislation later this week. The reviews from the inflation experts and the climate experts are all saying that this bill will have a major impact in both areas. Now, this is, where's Larry? I thought we had a Larry Summers thing. Oh, are those his quotes? No. Yes. In our caucus, we showed a video that got a lot of chuckles. It was Mitch McConnell saying the expert on inflation is Larry Summers. The expert on inflation is Larry Summers. And then we showed what Larry Summers said about the Inflation Reduction Act, that it will lower inflation. And that's what all the experts are saying. Just about every expert who looks at it says it's going to reduce inflation. Even Maya McGuinness and the Committee for Responsible Budget has said it will reduce inflation on all fronts. So the Republican idea that this doesn't do that makes no sense. In addition, the nonpartisan group Energy Innovation has found that the Inflation Reduction Act will create millions of jobs, reduce premature deaths from air pollution, and put the U.S. on a path to roughly 40% emission reductions by 2030. That's an amazing, amazing proposal. The bill is going to make the biggest investments in clean energy ever, not only reducing emissions by 40%, but helping prevent 100,000 asthma attacks a year, because there's a focus on environmental justice. And oftentimes, the people who suffer the most from asthma are in the poorest communities and the most densely populated communities. Put simply, this legislation will save lives, create jobs, reduce costs. All these voices are saying the same thing. So, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to take meaningful steps on these issues, and Democrats will pass this bill in coming days. Senator Wyden.